Gladiator was a masterpiece, an epic tale with an unforgettable ending. So why on earth did Hollywood decide to make Gladiator 2 nearly 25 years later? Is it a bold new take or just a hollow cash grab? From recycled plotlines to awkward character choices, this sequel has ignited fierce debates. Let's dive in and uncover what went wrong. This revision keeps the spirit of your original hook while adding a little more punch with phrases like cash grab and awkward character choices to intensify the curiosity and tension. It should keep viewers hooked and ready to hear your deeper dive into the movie's flaws. Imagine being asked to name a movie that definitely didn't need a sequel. I bet Gladiator would top most lists. The original was a masterpiece of film that told a complete and satisfying story, starring Russell Crowe in one of his best roles. Ridley Scott directed with skill, and the ending hit hard emotionally. So when I heard about Gladiator 2, nearly 25 years later, I was confused. Why bring this back? And after seeing it, well, I'm still wondering the same thing.
If I was asked to put together a list of movies that totally didn't need sequels, I think it's fair to say that Gladiator would have to be pretty near the top. It was a great movie back in the day, from a director who was still at the top of his game, showcasing a superb performance from Russell Crowe and telling a complete, dramatically satisfying story with a poignant ending. So I have to admit, I went into Gladiator 2 almost a quarter of a century later, feeling kind of confused about why this movie even existed. And well, I came out feeling pretty much the same way. Gladiator 2 is a movie that feels as much of a loose remake as a sequel, going over the same narrative ground and recycling all the major plot points and characters from the original, only dumber and slower this time around. And the result is a clunky, meandering kind of film that's actually shorter than the original but feels longer somehow, bloated with far too many characters that aren't especially well developed or interesting, and a plot that just doesn't know when to end. The movie's set 16 years after the original. Rome is now ruled over by two emperors, both of whom are either mad or retarded or something, and their obsession with military conquest means that the empire is slowly collapsing from the inside as hunger and discontent takes its toll on the population. Anyway, this is where we pick up with our main man Lucius, the kid from the first movie, who's living in North Africa under a new name with his hot wife. Unfortunately, it all goes wrong when Pedro, Pascal and the Roman army show up to spoil the fun, and before you can say et tu brute, his wife's dead, the city's fallen, and Lucius has been shipped back to Rome as a slave. That's when he runs into Denzel Washington, who takes a liking to him and trains him up to be a gladiator, on the promise that he'll deliver Pedro Pascal's head if he wins enough matches. Meanwhile, Pascal himself is getting sick of the emperors and all their shit, so he plans to stage a coup to depose them. This all seems very familiar. Then Connie Nielsen gets involved because Lucius does the soil thing that Maximus did in the original movie, so she realizes he's actually the son she sent away into hiding 16 years ago.
Gladiator 2 isn't so much a true sequel as it is a loose remake. It treads familiar ground, recycling major plot points from the first film, but this time, it's slower and dumber. The movie feels clunky, meandering, and somehow longer even though it's shorter than the original. It's bloated with underdeveloped characters and a plot that doesn't know when to end. The film picks up 16 years later in a decaying Rome ruled by two emperors who are either mad or incompetent. The empire is falling apart with discontent simmering in the streets. Enter Lucius, the kid from the first film. He's living under a new name in North Africa, enjoying life with his wife. But then chaos strikes when Pedro Pascal's Roman army arrives and things go south fast. Lucius' wife is killed and he's shipped back to Rome as a slave. From there, things get even more familiar. Lucius meets Denzel Washington, who trains him to be a gladiator. There's a promise of revenge if Lucius wins enough matches, he'll get to take down Pedro Pascal's character. Meanwhile, Pascal is plotting a coup against the emperors. It all spirals from there, leading to political scheming, betrayal, and a few too many predictable twists. The movie hits some familiar beats from the first film, but with less emotional weight. Lucius' quest for revenge feels hollow and loses meaning when it's spread across multiple antagonists, first Pascal, then the emperors, and finally Denzel. His arc lacks consistency and his dramatic moments fall flat.
No way!
Wow, what are the odds, eh? So while all this is going on, Denzel Washington learns about Pedro Pascal's attempted coup and rats him out to the emperors, so he's forced to fight Lucius in the arena. Now, you might think that would be a logical place to end the movie because Lucius has finally taken revenge on the man who killed his wife. But nah, we've still got about half an hour to go.
Fuck.
So the Roman people are getting a bit pissed off with all this nonsense and start fiery but mostly peaceful protests all around the city, and Denzel Washington manages to play the two retarded emperors off against each other so he can take power for himself. But wouldn't you know it, Lucius and the gladiators escape and go on a rampage just as Pedro Pascal's army show up, because I guess they're willing to fight and die for a man that they've never met, don't even know exists, and only have an old ring as proof that he says what he means. Oh yeah, and Connie Nielsen gets shot in the chest with an arrow by Denzel Washington because, evil, I guess. Then there's a big standoff with the two armies outside the city, and Lucius and Denzel Washington have a sword fight. A flabby 70-year-old senator versus a 28-year-old bodybuilding gladiator. Guess who wins? Then Lucius delivers a long rambling speech about saving the Roman dream.
Save the dream!
And that's it, that's the plot for Gladiator 2.
Really?
You know, reviewing Gladiator 2 is actually a pretty easy proposition because every single aspect of this film is basically an inferior copy of its predecessor. For a start, there was Maximus from the first movie, a Roman general charged with taking over the empire and reforming it into a republic by the aging emperor, only to get betrayed by his son Commodus and have his family murdered. A decent man who tried to do the right thing and got punished for it. He's got a very powerful and understandable motivation that remains consistent throughout the movie and informs everything that he says and does. When he takes his helmet off and reveals his true identity to Commodus, you can practically feel the rage and hatred radiating from him. In Gladiator 2, his arc has been split between two separate characters, Lucius and Pedro Pascal. Lucius shares the tragic family deaths and the desire for revenge, but it cycles through a bunch of different antagonists so that it gradually loses its meaning. First Pedro Pascal, then the retarded emperors, then finally Denzel Washington. He doesn't even really want to kill Pascal after a while and just kind of lets it all go. At first he hates his mother for abandoning him, but then like 5 minutes later they're totally cool again.
There's a weird rambling speech toward the end that feels completely off, especially after Russell Crowe's intense performance in the original. Now let's talk about the cast. Pedro Pascal is fine, but he's miscast as a hardened military veteran. His character doesn't really stand out, and honestly I didn't care much when he met his end. Denzel Washington, on the other hand, is a great actor, but he sticks out like a sore thumb here. His modern-day accent and mannerisms clash with the historical setting, and his character's motivations are vague at best. It's a wasted opportunity for such a talented actor. Then there are the two emperors who deliver some of the most over-the-top performances I've ever seen. They're so ridiculously evil and cartoonish that it's hard to take them seriously. It's like they were written to be villains for the sake of being villains. There's no depth, no real motivation behind their actions. They're just there to cause chaos. The comparisons to the original are inevitable, and honestly, they don't do Gladiator 2 any favors. The first film had a strong, well-developed antagonist in Commodus, a character with depth and a clear motivation. In contrast, these new villains are just laughable. In the end, Gladiator 2 feels like a cash grab, trying to recapture the magic of the first film, but failing to do so. It's a film that didn't need to exist. If you want more sword and sandal action, just watch the original again. It's a much better use of your time. And that's all I've got for today. Thanks for listening, and well, you can go now.